Yes. What? Sunderland Airport.
We're on the air.
There's a Sunderland.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was a British aircraft. I didn't realize it was a.
And council is with us.
Okay, so
Here's the new version.
good morning. We are,
Thank you.
this is the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. It is 10:47 a.m. We're resuming work on Bill H.466, an act relating to surface water withdrawals and interbasin transfers. We've been working on this for weeks. I think Mr. O'Grady has an amendment to walk us through, but prior to that, we're going to have one brief visit with sorry, I don't have my program in front of me here. So, Mr. Unang's
Graham, yeah. Graham Nuts.
Rafaha. How close am I?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. You're very close. I think where my name came from, it probably would have been pronounced Unangst, Rufanacht or something, but we say Unangst, Rufanacht around here at least.
Hey, Graham. Okay.
Hey, Brian, everybody.
Is it H-A-C-T or N?
It is E-N, so with an N, A-C-H-T, Nacht, like.
That's okay, like night.
Correct.
Okay, got it. No wonder it was seeming odd to me. All right, thank you. The floor is yours. What would you like us to know about 466? Please.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate you all fitting me in here, and I'll try not to take up much of your time. I have watched, I think, all of the testimony you've taken at this point, so I do know that you've been taking a lot. There's been multiple amendments made, and I understand that Legislative Council will be offering another amendment this morning. And I believe I've seen it, the document already as well. So what I hope to do here is just, share some of rural Vermont's perspective on this bill and some other sort of this context of, I think, upcoming climate legislation and climate work we'll be seeing and having to do together just really quickly. So I do appreciate, as an organization, I think we've seen you've come a long way in this bill. The removal of the language springs, which means, which takes away the concerns with the existing groundwater definition, or at least one of the definitions. We've seen the removal of the requirement for metering, allowing other low-cost approved options. And it looks, Legislative Council has not introduced the next amendment yet, but it looks like you're going a little further also to try to meet the concerns around the small, the 5,000 gallon registration threshold as well. So, and we've heard, Justin Rich and Ryan from the agency and others, signify their appreciation for particular of those amendments, and also, still have their own concerns. And I think from our perspective, we can really understand both sides here. I think Jeff Crocker's testimony has been really powerful in terms of understanding why the concerns there are around withdrawals. And I think all the farming testimony has also been really strong about why people feel really concerned about in reporting requirements and potential new permitting process going forward in the future. And I think what I would just want to bring to the table today is that, in this case, the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association, as they said, they represent over 425 small vegetable growers in Vermont, for the most part, and berry growers. And this is an organization which is really rooted in connecting growers in peer-to-peer networking. It's an organization which very rarely makes political stances and comes out to speak on issues. So I just want it to, at least from my perspective, that's what I've noticed, being a member for a number of years now, being a producer myself who's attached to that listserv through my own personal work as well as through my professional work. So I just think it's important to know that these are concerns that were felt strongly in a community, strong enough for this organization to come out and make their voice heard, which is something they rarely choose to do. And I do see that you all listened and tried to accommodate to a great degree. And I think what I want to say is that going forward with climate change, with the climate action plan, with concerns around water, and with increasing economic inequity, with the reckoning we're having with the history of racial injustice in our country, there's just going to be a lot more conversations about how we equitably manage our resources and equitably support different people with different positionalities. So, and we're going to have to do that together between the natural resources community and the agricultural community and all these other communities. So if we do, for example, feel it's important to come down and get really granular levels of data analysis, like this 5,000 gallons threshold that was originally mentioned, we have to, if we have to, what we're going to be collecting and reporting that data really need and be able to bring them in early. And I understand that folks from the natural resources side of the community seem to think that ag had a good representation on the working group. I've talked to a number of farmers who looked at that list and say, wow, it feels like there really wasn't that much great representation. So there's going to be different perspectives on this, but just having a way that we can all meet and understand how different communities are impacted, because it's one thing for a highly capitalized business like a ski area or a golf course or other entities to be able to plan for extracting water at particular times of the year, to be able to build infrastructure like ponds for retaining it at times of high flow, for times of low flow. And it's another thing for some of the most economically marginalized businesses in our community, being farms, to afford some of this infrastructure and to think about this, especially when they're needing water at some of those drought times when they'd be told they can't, they may not go to extractions in the future. And we don't know that yet, but these are some of the concerns. So I think the positionality of the different people really needs to be considered as we go forward. And again, not just the positionality in terms of economic positionality, but when we talk about what these businesses are producing, and I know folks have come forth and talked about this, and I think even Ryan at the agency was hinting he didn't want to touch too hard on this, but when we talk about climate resiliency, growing food here in this place is an integral, essential part of what we're doing. These people are providing essential services. So how we treat people providing essential services needs to be different than how we treat people providing leisure services, whether that's skiing or golf or otherwise, even if they are recreational activities and provide benefit in people's lives in other ways. As we go forward in a climate resilient context, we're going to have to really consider the different positionalities people have and understand that the work of people growing food for our community members is as important as the integrity of our ecological systems. They are incredibly mutually interdependent. And without people producing food, we're going to be relying, as Justin Rich said, on the deserts of New Mexico to bring produce here, or other other states where the regulations aren't as good. So again, I'm not saying we need to trade ecological impact for farm viability. We just need to understand how we're going to make sure we have more and more farmers in the landscape, more and more people growing food, so that we can continue forward in this climate context as a species, let alone as a state. One of the things that came up, and I think that when we're talking about water, and I wanted to get this on the record, and I know some of the folks have talked to this a little bit, but one of the reasons this was concerning to a number of the farmers I spoke with is they understand that people want to know how much is withdrawn, and they can understand the withdrawal side of the equation. They really only see that as one aspect of this larger holistic question around how water is used in Vermont and how we contribute to a water resilient ecosystem and economy. So when we're talking about water use that's being blown into the air, I see the message. I'm finishing up here. For skiing or applied in different ways, it's very different when we're discreetly applying water at the surface of a landscape, when we're replenishing the water table with the water we're using, and we're using it for basically photosynthesis, carbon sequestration through that, bringing biology to the life. And I'm not saying that farms don't create problems, but I'm saying that essential, what the work, how farms are applying water, in particular ways of applying water, should be considered. And I know that you'd all like me to finish, so I'll end there. So just a holistic approach to water, bringing in all the communities, and recognizing the positionality of different people and the essential nature of growing food here in Vermont to feed our populations going forward.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you for being brief, which I don't mean in any sort of unpleasant way. It's just that we're short on time. I think the committee is aware and sensitive to the issue, which is part of why we've spent so much time working with the farm community. I think one thing that was maybe a bit of a problem in the process was that the agency, I'm not sure that they represented the interests of the folks that the fruit and vegetable community, at least as it was presented to the committee. So maybe that's why the rule came, or the bill came out at such a level that it was a concern to find. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think by way of reassurance, the levels in other states that people are looking at and feeling like they're much more permissive, or whatever you want to call it, those are, in most cases, they're regulated programs. And at this point, all we're doing is the inventory. So we're trying to make, and I understand how people could see the thresholds and say, well, that is what will be used in the permit. And that is hypothetical. And so I think you've helped make everyone aware that, fine, we're participating in the inventory, but no one should assume that the eventual regulatory program will mirror exactly what the inventory thresholds are. And then lastly, because there's a rulemaking, I think you all are very aware that part of the reason it goes to rulemaking is so that folks in your line of business can participate firsthand in the discussions that consider things like watershed size, flow volume, et cetera, what might constitute de minimis, cumulative impacts, even when de minimis on the same stream. I mean, there's a lot of nuance that the bill doesn't even come close to. And so by way of reassurance, I think you've educated everyone, and we're better equipped going forward on the inventory and the rulemaking that follows. So thank you for that. With that, I'd like to turn to Mr. O'Grady and ask him to walk us through draft 4.1 of 466, which is a further amendment, proposal of amendment to H466.
Good morning. The document that's posted on your website is not the correct document. It's a 492 document. Do you all have a hard copy of the 466 amendment?
Yes. So can I just, so the one I'm looking at is 4.1, date stamp 4/13/22, time stamp 6:17 p.m. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
People who are looking for it online can find it on the Senate Agricultural Committee's website from yesterday. Do you want me to just walk through the changes between 3.1 and 4.1, or the whole amendment?
Let's do the whole amendment because I'm hoping we can prove the vote.
Okay, sure. So the first instance of amendment is there are two changes. They are both to the definition of surface water. The first removes the term springs from the definition of surface water because you heard testimony.
Highlight.
Thank you.
There it
is.
You heard testimony from the Agency of Agriculture that the groundwater withdrawal permit program applies to springs, and that they thought that there was ambiguity or at least conflict between the two programs. The recommendation of A&R, the term springs was struck because the definition of surface water includes that kind of umbrella phrase, all bodies of surface waters. So they believe that springs would be covered by that if it's a surface water spring, and therefore to avoid the confusion and conflict, spring is struck. Similarly, in subdivision 20D, in what is not considered a surface water, remember there was a list of 4 things not considered surface waters. There had previously been language around constructed ponds or other impoundments that are used for irrigation or watering of livestock that are not subject to the Vermont water quality standards. The Agency of Agriculture raised concern about that language and about how it was confusing to them. Again, the Agency of Natural Resources recommended a change to say that constructed off-stream farm ponds or other off-stream impoundments that are used for irrigation or watering of livestock are not surface waters. The term off-stream effectively means it's not subject to the Vermont water quality standards. So the substantive impact is negligible at best. But this is something that the Agency of Agriculture thought was more clarifying or intuitive for their community, and therefore they have supported it.
Great. And I think,
So
let's go on to the second. Thank you.
the second instance of amendment relates to the registration requirement, and specifically the threshold for registration, which becomes the threshold for reporting as well. So beginning on January 1, 2023, any person withdrawing 10,000 gallons or more of surface water, as you all know, it was previously 5,000 gallons. So 10,000 gallons or more of surface water, then a 24-hour period, or 150,000 gallons over any 30-day period shall register with the secretary. I believe it was the chair's intent by increasing 5,000 to 10,000 to address the point that I believe it was Mr. Justin Rich from the fruit and vegetable growers noted that there might be one day in a season or a month where a farmer needs to use more than 5,000 gallons, and that would then somehow bring them into this regulatory program of registration and reporting. To avoid that, the threshold for a day for the 24-hour period was increased to 10,000, but still, if the average is 5,000 gallons a day over 30 days, which would be 150,000 gallons in a 30-day period, they would still need to register.
So if by way of explanation, if the trigger for any particular one day was sort of, I guess the farm community is saying too sensitive, we move that up. But the larger concern is total water use. And so we retain the 150,000 in a month figure, so that if someone in fact is using a significant volume of water, namely 150,000, then they trigger the requirement. It allows more flexibility for farmers, but if the impacts are going to be cumulative in a month, then they still trigger the old threshold. Okay, thanks, Mr. O'Grady.
Thanks for that.
Okay, moving on. The next change is really about that threshold. So the methods of reporting withdrawals between 10,000 and 50,000 gallons for non-agricultural uses can provide an estimate or meter data. Withdrawals of more than 50,000 gallons within a 24-hour period or 1.5 million gallons over any 30-day period provides meter data and measured data by a technically appropriate method. And then to address the concerns of farmers about putting in meters on their irrigation lines, you included subdivision C2 here, which is the reporting method for irrigation of watering or livestock of more than 10,000 gallons. Again, moving the 24-hour threshold up from 5,000 to 10,000, but then allowing them to provide an estimate of the total volume withdrawal based on log records pursuant to technically appropriate method approved by the secretary. So they won't have to install meters, which they are concerned are expensive. They indicated that they do keep log records, and if that's something that A&R approves for reporting, then that's how they will estimate their volume withdrawn.
Thank you. And so for the committee, let me know if you want to go on and look at the third and fourth instances. Those are the ones that we looked at before. It was to allow to ask the secretary to produce a general permit, and that was for.
Are they highlighted, Mr. Chair? They're not highlighted.
They're not.
The ones we already.
They're
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
They have been the same since the second draft.
All set.
Okay, so are there any committee questions for Mr. O'Grady about this draft amendment 4.1? Seeing or hearing none, Chair would welcome a motion to amend 4.6.6. So, okay, and
Moved by,
Chair McCormick, would you make the motion?
So moved.
Okay, so any further discussion?
this is the amendment.
So this is vote to amend. So all those in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that's 5-0-0 on the amendment. And now we're looking for a motion to move.
I'll move the bill as amended.
Move the bill as amended by Senator Westman.
You want roll call or you're good?
Roll call, please.
Senator McDonald,
Yes.
Senator McCormick,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Senator Campion, yes, Senator Bray.
Yes. Is there
Five.
anyone who would like to report this?
0-0.
All right, I'm happy to report it.
No, we're dumping all the work on you. I'll do it.
Okay, Senator McCormick, thank you. 5-0-0, you know the process.
And, okay, great.
We'll get this up to the Senate Secretary. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. O'Grady. And thank
So
you- Yeah,
I will send to Jude a version that has highlighting removed.
great.
But I'm locked out of the system right now for some reason, so it might take me a few minutes.
Okay. Thank-
So we're not doing this as a strike law, though. We're doing separate amendments,
It's a strike law.
or doing it as a strike law?
No, it's not a strike call. It's not a strike call. It's separate
Separate.
amendments.
So we have the underlying bill, we just added this to it.
Right.
And that's it.
So
Okay.
I will
A
provide.
little harder to report. So.
I will provide Senator McCormick with a section by section of the underlying bill and a summary of the amendment.
Great. Thank you, Mr. O'Grady. All right.
Okay.
And thanks to everyone who worked on this. It's been a longer haul than anyone thought, but I think we came out in a good place. With that, we're going to change channels and move back to Bill H715, an act relating to the clean heat standard. The Public Utility Commission has expressed some concern with the changes to the bill, so
What draft, we have what number are we on?
3.1, we have a new
Perfect.
version
Yep,
today.
got it.
And that number is 4. Yeah. So, yeah, we want for reference, they may be referring to 3.1.
Okay,
I don't think, at any rate, with that, Mr. Nauer, welcome back to the committee. We, of course, like to hear from the PUC since you are carrying all the water, and Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I can only say your name in full. So thank you to both of you. You have a huge role in the bill. So of course we want to hear what your thoughts are on how it now stands. The floor is yours.
I appreciate it. Thanks. I'm Kyle Landis-Marinello, General Counsel at the Public Utility Commission. And then here remotely is Tom Nauer, the Policy Director. I emailed this to Jude just before coming over, but if you can grab it, it's just 2 pages. That we do have some changes that we think are needed to this bill. And I'll
pass it to
we'll
you.
try to be very brief, but there are a couple edits. We did try to keep them minimal. This is a double-sided piece with our suggested edits. A couple of comments on why we're making these requested edits. And then the second piece of paper is just a 1-pager on deliberative polling that I just printed off from Stanford University, and I'll reference that in a minute. But first, I do want to let Tom have the floor to explain kind of the first change, which is the much bigger one to this latest draft. it's in response to a big change that was made just this week
Yeah.
that we think fundamentally changes what this proposal has been all along and creates some real problems for us. And so if you don't want to read the whole comment now, you can just look at the first sentence where we say that these changes are necessary to make this bill feasible. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Right. Good morning. Thank you to the committee for getting us on the schedule today. The handout that Kyle has given you, probably speaks for itself. Up until this week, the bill had the commission implementing this by order issued by July 1, 2024. The fundamental change that's referenced is now the commission would be required to do this by rule. That rulemaking, adoption of final rules by July 1, 2024. But there's also the commencement of the rulemaking by October of 23, preceded by a 30-day public comment period, followed by the consideration of those comments. So really, we're backing up to the July or August 2023 timeframe for the commission to have a rule together that's ready to go. And so basically the current drafts cut the public engagement time in half from approximately 2 years to 1 year. And we just don't think that's a tenable situation for the very large amount of work that needs to be done, especially in light of the significant new reporting requirements that have been introduced this week. And so in the interest of time, I will leave my comments there for now.
Okay, so, I think the rule was important to the committee to do it by rule. So then I'd say given that decision, we'd be looking to you for feedback on how the schedule might need to be adjusted in order to accommodate rulemaking. I mean, there's still orders are within the bill, but not for the entire, the end product, which was initially a draft order, becomes a draft rule. So I guess that's the major driver of the schedule, right? And so we'd like to know how to accommodate that in the bill. If you were to adjust dates. And let me respectfully ask, why would the public engagement process require 2 years? I mean, I know it is a lot of meetings. I think it's a total of 12. So is it that you want to be able to ask different questions over time as you're doing your work on designing how the program will be implemented? And therefore, I'm just trying to understand the different, why a year? A year sounds like a long time to hold 12 meetings, but obviously it depends on what the purpose of the meetings is. So could you help us understand that one better?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I guess that, we're a small agency. We have 25 people, including all 3 commissioners.
Yeah.
We have in this bill, and we're very grateful for this, an ability to hire 3 new people. Everyone is well aware that it is a very employee-friendly job market right now. So how quickly we'll actually be able to hire 3 qualified people and bring them on board is in question. Let's say we move very rapidly once this bill is approved, get the postings out, have all 3 people on board by August or September. They then are working on the public engagement process, but they would also have to start writing the rule at that point to actually have a draft ready by July 1 of the following summer in order to put it out for comments, get it back in time to have start the formal rulemaking on October 1st. So that's all required by this current version. If I'm a member of the public and I hear come do this public engagement, show up on your own free time to tell the Public Utility Commission how this rule should be drafted, and I also hear that the rule's already being penned in the meanwhile, it's going to have a hugely chilling effect on the actual public engagement that we could get. And so if we actually have the changes in here, we have the ability to do it by order, we can do the drafting as we're taking the public engagement, but we have much more flexibility to take any information we get in that process and actually implement it. And there are going to be big issues that come up. I mean, this is the first in the nation program. There is an email I just saw this morning from Commissioner Tierney of the Department of Public Service requesting a change to some of the language about how this interacts with Tier 3 and asking that be dealt with not in the legislation, but in with the commission. And more of those issues are going to come up, and we're going to be really pressed for time already. And if the latest changes, if the current version of the bill goes through, it becomes an incredible time press. And so, you know, if you gave us authority to hire 3 more people and we had confidence we'd be able to get all 6 of them on board by August, maybe we could make a timeline like this work. But as it is now, we're just thinking about the implementation side and really struggling with it. And so these changes, I think there might be a misperception of what happens when we do something by order. I do want to clarify.
That's just what I can say. I think we're pretty familiar with rulemaking, but I don't know that we know how different writing an order is for you.
Sure, and there's precedent for this. That's what happened with the renewable energy standard, was that was initially implemented by order and then it was followed by a rulemaking. And I want to be clear, if we can, we are going to go through a rulemaking process. It's just, we need to have the flexibility for making the early dates to do it by order. But when we issue an order, that order we have to follow all sorts of legal requirements, including the Administrative Procedure Act on issuing orders. It's subject to appeal at the Vermont Supreme Court. The legislature can come in at any point and issue new legislation that overrides any order of the Vermont Public Utility Commission. And so it's not as though an order that we issue is the final word on something. There's other safeguards in place. And
So I'm still not quite catching what's, you were saying, for instance, that if you have public participation going on at the same time that the rule is being drafted, that'll have a chilling effect. It's like, wait, you're asking them, you're already writing. Could you not be writing and listening to the input and modifying the rule that you're writing? Or, I mean, how would the order be different? How would writing an order at the same time as you're taking public testimony be different?
Well, we have much more time. We have a year more. So the draft here that we've proposed, this is the draft that that the bill has been for until a few days ago, has the commission issuing a final rule or order by July 1, 2024. The current version of the bill has us getting a proposed rule out effectively by July 1, 2023. So we have time to get comments on that before we start the formal rulemaking on October 1, 2023. So that's why Tom mentioned effectively cutting a year out of the process.
Okay, so Senator McDowell.
So I'm sure I'm partly responsible to this dilemma that you have brought. And my intention, Mr. Chair, is not to prohibit or hamstring the PUC in doing the work that they need to do to hire, to get information, to prepare a rule for implementation according to the Administrative Procedures Act. And when that rule is put forth and approved, it then has the force of law. And the reason I have been objecting was the previous time when we gave the PUC the power to implement their rules without going through the rules procedure.
Was that
And
by order then? Is that what you're-
we demanded in statute that they bring their rules that they had proposed to the legislature, and the legislature would have the opportunity to review those proposed rules, which was different from the rules procedure. That they would bring the rules to the legislature would meet, would have an opportunity to review them, to comment, to applaud, to amend, to intervene, whatever. And when the legislature was done, those rules, if they required changes and updates, and we made more demands on the PUC, they would take place after the legislature adjourned. But we gave the PUC the authority to implement them by order and not come back to the rules procedure. And the PUC didn't produce for the legislature, failed to deliver on time for whatever reasons, which is, so the legislature had no opportunity to review those rules as called for in statute. They had no opportunity to amend, recommend, ask for changes, etc. None. The legislature went home, and 2 months later, the PUC put those rules into effect that they had drafted and not shared with the legislature in a sort of check scenario. That the legislature had no opportunity to look at the things that the law called for the legislature to look at. And when we got back here in January, the rules were already in place. The utilities had changed their billing procedure. People who had net metering stuff had their reimbursements changed without a check back, without a review, without a prescribed activity. And the PUC said, well, you gave us the power to do this by rule. And we said, yeah, we gave you the power to do it by rule after you'd have presented it to the legislature. The legislature had a chance to check it. And you guys went out on the PUC and implemented it by rule anyway. Even though the purpose was clearly in statute that you were able to implement that by rule once the legislature had a look at it. So it was, the PUC used its power to do the rules as I have tried to describe them. And the PUC wrote us a letter after it was all over saying, we're sorry we didn't follow the law, et cetera, and we didn't do what the legislature called for, and we'll never do it again. So now we're in the same position. We'd like to see what you're going to do. And we don't want to give you the rule to the authority to implement it because you're uninterested in sharing with us. You're too lazy to share with us. You're overworked and can't finish it on time through no fault of your own to share it with us. Whatever the reason is, we're wary about allowing the PUC to implement the rules. So that's my objection, and I think that I appreciate that this committee, because this may be the third time I've run through this whole scenario, but this is a big deal. And we have to be able to say to the citizenry, in taking this leap into an area that is fraught with concern and some skepticism, that we haven't turned it over to a bunch of people who are not elected to do what they darn well please, because we gave them the authority to do it by order in the final analysis. So that's the problem we have, and that's the problem we have that I believe we need to feel comfortable about as a committee, and that our colleagues, our set of colleagues, need to be assured that that you guys can't be a runaway train by virtue of being given the authority to do something by order. But we'd like to be able to give you the authority to do things by order in order to present us a plan that we can then approve and coalesce on as it goes into effect.
Senator Camp.
So,
Senator Bray, thank you. Unless you object, given the timing of everything, I think we move this today. And again, unless you object, we do a floor amendment if need be. My concern is giving, and I look to Senator Westman, this has another trip. So it's just something to consider.
It's going to appropriation.
It'll be going to appropriations. I worry about their timing, et cetera. So and I have tremendous respect for Kyle, and absolutely in his position. And I'm not trying to close off conversation. I'm just thinking, do we do this and then we continue it a little bit?
So it's always, so thank you for coming over. I know we have more to talk about, and more to work on. It's always the intent of our committee to support both financially and with any kind of extra work we ever ask any other operating area to take on, as well as to have workable timelines. So I can commit to you that we'll continue to work with you. And as Senator Campion rightly points out, there's probably a week before this ever reaches the floor. So I'll be happy to work with my colleagues, and we'll craft an amendment that addresses as best we possibly can concern. So we'll buy ourselves the opportunity to do more work. We hear you and respect the PUC entirely, and want to make sure that we have a workable plan. So with that, we need to review one change to the bill based on discussions that we had.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Councilor, if you could join us with the chair, please.
Mr. Chair, and I'm perfectly willing to defer to the committee on the wisdom of how to deal with this aspect.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Mr. Kowski, if you could point us to the last change to the bill. Please.
Page 24 of draft 4.1. Small change that was previously implicit is now made explicit. So we're in the section 3, the implementation section. First, I added there is a clear reference to LCAR being made for the proposed rules. So that's really just technical. But then at the bottom of page 24, there's a sentence added that actually states existing law, but makes it clear. So for the final rules, in its review of the final proposed rules, the Legislative Committee on Rules shall consult with the committees of jurisdiction pursuant to 3 VSA 817C. LCAR currently has the existing authority to consult with the standing committees of jurisdiction on the rule. They have additional authority in that statute, but this is just putting it into this bill to make it clear that they will be consulting with the standing committees.
Thank you. So we've been using the term check back. There's a check back in the form of a report 23. There's another one 24. And when the rulemaking goes forward, this I would characterize as the third check back. There's LCAR plus committees of jurisdiction weighing in on the rule prior to its final disposition after moving through the LCAR process. Are any committee discussion on that additional language to clarify the process? All right. With that, I would welcome a motion to amend 8715 with draft 4.1 timestamp 4/15/22, 9:15 a.m.
So moved.
Senator McDonald moves. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So that's 5-0 on the amendment. If I did that right. So now be looking for a motion to vote out Bill H715 as so amended.
So moved.
Senator McDonald, call the roll, please.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator McCormick.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
No.
Senator Campion votes yes. Senator Bray.
Yes,
4-1-0.
thank you. And I'll report the bill. So thank you, everyone, for your participation. I look forward to continued work with Mr. Landis Marinello, Mr. Nauer, the PUC, while we have probably 5 to 7 days before the bill will be on the floor. And again, I'm committing to making sure that we provide adequate, to the extent that we are in control, that we're providing adequate funding and time to do the work requested. So thank you, everyone, for your help. We are adjourned for today.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
A clean copy of Michael's.
Oh, great.
Yes, here we go. Is that yours?
Oh, it is. Thanks, yeah.
His amendment.
So I had it on
Voted
paper
on
and
system. I
staff
put it in
decided
your
to rearrange my.
Did I run out of time?
No,
Was that
no.
unnecessary?
Nope, nope.
So that.
I've been known to do that.
Nope, it was good.
Senator McCormick, here's a clean copy of the bill.
It's helpful for all of us.
And we have the